So for our Conversations That Matter today, as our sermon topic, I'm entering into a conversation with Cheryl Bear. And I first met Cheryl back in somewhere around 2000, 2001, when I had just gotten back from the East Coast and had been involved with the Burnt Church lobster wars that had been right in the middle of my first pastoral charge in ministry. And so it was so wonderful to meet Cheryl and her partner at that time, and to find out that she's both a singer and songwriter, as well as right now she's the director of community ministry for First United Church in downtown Vancouver. So Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you for your kind welcome and introduction, Dan.
Yeah, so we're going to have a bit of a conversation here, and it'll be maybe wide-ranging, and we hope it's something that helps and encourages us to dig deeply into the things that matter to us as people of faith. So the first question, Cheryl, who are you from your perspective? Because it's always nice to have a great introduction and to hear the top titles that we carry. Who are you? Where do you come from? What brings you here as a person? What has formed you to who you are?
Oh, interesting. Well, the Indigenous way of introducing ourselves is like the first question we ask after we ask what your name is. First question we ask is, where are you from? And that's because, so when I introduce myself, I say, Hadi, Cheryl Bear Slee, Natle Westen, Demden Slee. My name is Cheryl Bear, and I'm from the beautiful village of Natle Westen, which is about an hour and a half west of Prince George. And it's, we used to be called the Carrier Nation. And that's because the fur traders said we were really good at carrying heavy loads for long distances. And I always say, I think they were prophetic. But we call ourselves Yinka Dene, the people of the land, or Daket, which means the people who travel on the water. Natle means the place where the salmon return. And so, yeah, that's my mom was born in Natle, and then when she met my dad, non-natives, they moved to Prince George, and that was where I was born and lived. But my mom had some, I think, pretty serious culture shock, and also just really was homesick. So she went back home a lot. So I would always tag along with her. So I have this really strong connection to Natle, and that's where, when we would drive onto the land, that's where she would kind of relax. And now I do that too. I drive to Natle and I just kind of sigh, and I feel like I'm home. And I feel like I know everybody in every house. I know who they are, and a lot of them are related to me. My two aunties still live there. My mom passed a year and a half ago. One of her brothers is still there though. So I still have a lot of family there. And when I drive onto the land, I used to feel like it was just me sort of like, loving the land and the people. But now I kind of feel like that part of that relaxing is the land is also sighing and saying, it's you, you're home. So that says, I think, a lot about every Indigenous person, that real strong connection to the land. No matter how far away we go, we're tied to the land. We always come back home, at the very least, to be buried. And right now I'm on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish.
Yeah. It's I like what you're saying about this place, that it feels like home. It is home.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a time right now where things are really mixed up in how we interact, how we can't interact, where we are, what the freedom to just be where we want to be, and now, even if we're living distant from here, don't have the freedom to travel necessarily easily back to our place of real comfort and restoration for us. So I hear it's wonderful. Thank you. The reason I ask that question is because who we are, in my experience, we bring that into the ministry that we were called into, And it's out of who we are that we live out our ministry, however that unfolds. And so I I like this idea of what conversations that matter, uh, when we have a conversation that goes deeper than just the surface. What is it that's driving us right now in our ministry? Maybe it's the agendas of the ministry, or our own purpose and focus in ministry, but then also in our personal life. What is the passion that drives us to continue to attend to the things that are important to us?
Uh, well, I think hopefully calling, but
Yeah.
God's call on us. But I think for me, it's been like I took a few years off to do politics. I was a counselor, like city, mayor and city council. We have chief and
Mhm.
council. So I was a counselor for 4 years, and then I did another half of a term. But during those 4 years, I was still doing ministry a little bit, but not as much. And I found like that everything that was good that I brought to the table in my short political career, I was just basically pastoring sort of the room, or any setting
Mm.
that we were in. I found myself using all of the tools that I had learned and the schooling and everything else, and sort of like helping to move things along in that sort of a way and bring sort of a different tone and stuff. So then that's when I thought, why am I in politics? Because I really couldn't stand politics. I can't stand I have way too, I don't have enough patience. And I kind of feel like, why can't we just do the right thing? Why is it always like you do this a little bit and I'll do this a little bit? And it's always just so like complicated. The right thing to me is just always the right thing. So, um, but anyway, and of course, you got to have the give and take and whatever. But I thought, why am I should just be pastoring. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to um, try and apply for this job, and I got it, and I'm happy, really happy there.
Wonderful.
I've only been
Yeah.
there since October, but it's been really great.
Yeah. Well, Tsawwassen United Church, where I'm the minister, they have had a ongoing outreach, involvement with First United, supporting in many different ways, and I was happy when I came 11 years ago to find that out and know that connection as well. Being there, being the director of community ministry, you're involved, you're hands-on with people in the downtown east side.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I was pastoring there before. My late ex husband and I planted a church in 19. Oh well, it was 1992 when we started it.
Mhm.
Took a year or so to get off the ground, but then we moved the location from commercial like Britannia. We're using one of the rooms at the community center, and then we moved right to 175 East Hastings and planted a street church.
Mhm.
So we were there for until 2005, and then did some other things for a bunch of years. But yeah, that was quite an experience and at that time there was at that time most of the places had most of the churches didn't have kind of late night stuff, and also they were anyway, we're right on the block, as they say, the 100 block of East Hastings, and that is just sort of like seething with energy and people and all
Mhm.
like right out the door, right? So we would tell people, come to the meeting on Friday, and they would be like, "What's the day today?" And we're like, "It's Thursday," and they're like, "Oh, okay." And then we'll say it's Thursday. It starts at 7 o'clock. Oh, what time is it now? And so we just decided to just open up every single night, and it was really a lot of work and very busy, and
Mhm.
but that was so the job that I have now is a little less like busy and crazy as that was. There's a lot more sort of protective measures involved, and it's for not only for health and safety, but for burnout and stuff. So I'm really happy about all of
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And yeah, the folks like, so I'm not like sort of jumping in, not knowing the neighborhood. It's quite a startling neighborhood to a lot of folks who first get there, and
Yes.
it's overwhelming, and it can be scary, and it can be, daunting, and just this serious feeling of overwhelm is quite normal. I think that if you see me walking around downtown, like I'm just sort of like, I know a lot of people. I know where safe places are. I feel safe there. So
Mm.
my reaction is probably very different from most Canadians, but it really is like a small town inside of a big city. So
Okay.
it's everybody seems to know everybody. So
Yeah. Yeah. Now, First United, of course, is dealing with a lot of very what we might consider heavy red button issues in society. You know, people living on the streets, hunger, homelessness. Uh, in the middle of all of that, and how people perceive this is so mixed. The First Nation presence and the Truth and Reconciliation, they all seem to get tied together somehow. And rightly or wrongly, people have gained a certain perspective because of that.
mhm.
How, coming from the work that you do there, what are some of the very important things for us to know in the United Church to be aware of that we're already doing, but also that you might identify as actually these are areas that we probably could do even more?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, for sure. Of course, in my mind, when you talked about what drives you in ministry, and I sort of felt like
Yeah.
I the answer today is, and it's been for a long time in my life and ministry, is justice.
Yes.
So seeing justice happen, and that's one thing that I do appreciate about First United is that it's not there are it's not just a charity model.
Right.
Charity models seem to just perpetuate themselves, and they have a lifetime job because they don't change anything that's going on in the neighborhood. They just keep whatever. And to me, we had at the other place I was at, we had a Bible college, and so trying to like build people up and give them dignity and all this, treat them with dignity. At first, it's just this wonderful blend of strong charity model. There's lots of the shelter, the food distribution, the clothing distribution, medical stuff. There's so much happening at first for the community, and it's really known as a place of social justice. It's really known as a place where you can get help. You can walk up to the door 24/7 and knock on the door, and and get some kind of help.
Mhm.
um, but also the justice aspect. So we have a social justice committee, and we have, like most folks, I guess, and we have partnership circles that are doing training and trying to. But the two main goals that we have at first are, the first one is homelessness is or housing is a human right. So that's, to me, is beautiful. So trying to house everyone. And um, and I like, one of the things that my boss, the executive director, Carmen Lansdowne, we were talking about, and we're in the process of moving some things around, and we're talking about the future of the shelter, like in 3 years or whatever. And she said, well, maybe homelessness won't be a thing anymore, we won't need it. And I just love that faith. I thought,
Yeah.
and there's plans and process to talk to government, to talk to different agencies to do something about the homelessness issue. Uh so that to me is, and I forgot the question because I went off on that whole justice thing.
No, it's okay. No, it's really great. Yeah, no, that's where a lot of your focus is right now, I expect. Yeah.
And you mentioned also the indigenous people,
Yeah.
like the inner cities are across Canada, and I've worked with lots of agencies, Toronto and Regina and Saskatoon and different places, and they all say that their clients, or the community members that use their services are usually about half native. So it's about 50% native. And that's astounding. And also, if you think about the percentages of how many Indigenous people there are in Canada compared to Euro Canadians.
Yes.
So, so this is, it's topsy-turvy, it's bonkers. And there are reasons why there is poverty and addiction, and it's because of 500 years of colonization, the effects of colonization, and lots of that. We could go on and on about those issues. So that's really important to me as well, to train people to talk about decolonization. I do a talk on decolonization, and I say we need to decolonize everything. Like Canada needs to be decolonized. The church needs to be decolonized. The Bible needs to be decolonized. And then I usually freak people out when I say that, because decolonization is such a big, scary word. People say, it feels like you're going to take everything away that I know, and you're going to change everything, and I won't recognize everything. And it's like, well, that kind of happened to Native people already.
Mm.
So, but that's not what decolonization means. It simply means listening to a different story and changing your mind. So when I ask, if I'm speaking to a group, I'll ask, can I have a show of hands? If you please answer the question, have you heard of the residential schools? Yeah. And now today in 2021, almost everybody, everybody puts up their hand in these spaces. Mm-hmm. Unless there's an American in the crew. And then, there's a whole other,
another dynamic.
Obviously that they need to know, and there are Indian boarding schools, they were started in the US by Richard Pratt, a Christian military man. But I asked that question, and then everybody's like, why is she asking this question? And I say, well, if you have heard about the residential schools, that means that you have been decolonized. And the residential schools taking Canada to court and telling everybody their story, and they decolonized Canada in a big way. And we still have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more to talk about. But that's an example of how decolonization is good. It's a beautiful thing, because, when people, I've been teaching in churches and talking about residential schools for 25 years. And before 2008, when the apology, they won the class action suit in 2007, but before the apology, 2008, most people, 99% of everybody I talked to in churches would be aghast at learning about the residential schools, because nobody knew. It was Canada's dirty little secret. And so to have that sort of revealed in the truth tone, that's revelation. That's beautiful. Yeah. So, and I think so God's heart for all of us to know the truth. And I think that whenever there's the truth is told, something of Jesus is in that truth.
So I love it, Cheryl. I'm going to ask an interesting question here, because I hear what you're saying, and the decolonize, when people raise their hand and say, I know about that, good, you're on the right path. That's great. What do we do when, and I'll ask it this way, how do we respond to non-interest, denial, ignorance, or chosen amnesia?
Good question. Well, that's a tough one, because I think I have run across a lot of people in my 25 years, people who feel like they already know the truth. They don't want to know, like, my truth or my story or our story, and that's just a tough one. Sometimes you just have to sort of put your hands in the air and say, oh well, we'll see you in heaven, kind of a thing. And I used to argue a lot with people. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, you know what, my health and mental health and my gut health is more important than this.
Then push to the end.
Argument. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's it makes me sad. It actually really breaks my heart when people don't want to, when they're so, think that they have all of the answers or whatever, or they don't need to learn anything more. It does break my heart, because I have traveled to over 600 First Nations communities in Canada and the United States. And I have just seen so much beauty in the elders and the babies and everybody in between, at powwows and at potlatches. And There's something here in Vancouver they have every year, usually every year. It's called Hobier, and it's a gathering of Giksan and Nishka, and they all, where there's like 200 drummers with regalia, and they're all drumming and singing the same song and dancing at the same time. And it's so, I'm getting chills even thinking about it. It's so
Mm-hmm.
powerful, and there's so
Mm-hmm.
much beauty there. And people, unfortunately, usually just see what the media wants us to see, and the story that's been told since the very beginning. Even when Columbus would write back to Europe, we were either dumb or scary. Those are the two things that have been told about us all of these 500 years.
Yeah.
And so if we're dumb, then we're not using the land, we're just, silly or whatever, so they can take the land. And it's usually always about the land. Or if
Yeah.
we're scary, well, then we don't deserve the land, so we'll take it away. So these issues and that portrayal, it's systemic racism. And a lot of people will have said to me in my lifetime that Canada was founded on Christian principles and it's a Christian nation, but it's actually founded on the doctrine of discovery, which is a Christian principle, but it's not a good one. It's systemic racism. It's so, from the very conception, even before these countries were born, the US and Canada, they were sowing seeds of racism right into the very soil. And unfortunately, that's the legacy that we have. And we can talk about it as old timey stuff, but how it relates to today is when I was in politics in on my reserve, and there was a company that wanted to do something on our land, like put a transmission line or whatever. And and of course it's a negotiation, right? So they say, okay, we'll do this, and we'll, as part of the, if you let us do this, we will give you this kind of whatever compensation, blah, blah, blah. And plus we will hire 20 or 50% of our laborers will be First Nations, and we'll train your guys and hire them. And then I heard that a couple of times, and then I was like, wait, why is it always laborers?
Yeah.
Why don't you, I want to be the CEO of your company. I want to be, we want to be environmental. We want to be engineers. Like, why don't you think about that for us? Why is it always just the very, lowest expectation? So, and that was the residential schools as well. People have said, well, at least those, those Indigenous students got an education. But what they were taught there was catechism, first of all, largely catechism. And secondly, like farming, and then the girls were taught cleaning and sewing. So they were essentially trained to be servants. And nobody was encouraged. My mom was really sharp. She was so witty and funny, and just if you had a problem, you could talk to mom about it, and she would think for a second or a minute, and then she'd have an answer. And she just made everything. She was just brilliant. And I asked her once. I said, "Mom, did they ever tell you, like?" I said, "Because you're really smart. Did anybody ever tell you, hey, you should go to college?" And her eyes just got big when she heard, when I asked for that. And I knew the answer was no. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So it plays out into the racism that was buried in the soil,
Yeah.
or planted in the soil. It plays out today, and it has all of these lasting effects. So.
And I'm just, if I might just speak a little piece of experience that I have, and I realize how small it is in the big picture. But one of the things that frustrated me, here I am speaking to somebody that has been frustrated. Your whole history has been frustrated. But so my big connection with working in the middle of conflict with First Nations was in Burn Church in 1999 with the Supreme Court decision. And then the lobster wars broke open right on the doorstep of my first pastoral charge. And I thought, what do I do in the middle of all of this? Well, it was a hugely rich and an amazing time, as much as it was a challenge. And the whole thing of the violence that unfolded, and the people that were hurt and injured and all of these things. And then last year, it comes back again. It cycles back. They're fighting on the water again. over the lobsters.
Yeah.
Why do we, what is it? Well, we know what it is when our heart is open to understand, and it's this racism that will box everyone in and hide you away and shut it down because we don't want to deal with it, you know. So it's just fascinating to me. I mean, and you talk about the long history of your people. It's just like, how do you deal with that cycle
Mhm.
over and
Yeah,
over?
it's tough. Yeah, and it's tough when it keeps coming back at you constantly.
Yeah.
It's never stopped. It's never, yeah, it's never gotten easier.
Mm,
So, yeah, it's every day feels like a fight in some way.
mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's uh, and I just read an interesting article. There's a native lady that said, we're always getting called resilient because we're and I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like we are strong and all of that, but some days it's like
It's
it's
too much.
overwhelming to keep telling this. Also, these stories are very personal,
Yeah.
but or
Yeah.
some stories can be personal, but then the person said we shouldn't call it ourselves resilient. We should call ourselves or we should call it resistance. And I kind
Mm,
of like that. I kind of thought
mm,
that was kind of cool. Like, and that seems to be what's been happening the last bunch of years. I don't know how many years, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
and with the United Church's involvement, and I know it's not the only party, but one of the parties involved in the Truth and Reconciliation and all of this unfolding more and more.
mhm,
You know, there is a there is a resistance, standing up against or standing up to,
yeah,
calling to account. Yeah.
yeah, mhm,
I love what you've been doing is telling us your story, and you've named it a couple of times. When we talk about our story, it's so important. Where the last question I'll have us look at a little bit here. Where does our faith enter into these conversations? Through our story, through our personal experience in life. Where's our faith speaking into these things for us?
that's a good question. I have so I became a Christian when I was like 8, and I had and it wasn't because I heard how cool Jesus was. It was because I didn't want to go to the place. It was a summer camp. I didn't want to go to the place they kept yelling about hell. So that was my conversion experience. And then I that later that year I was a voracious reader, and I was reading everything in the library, and the librarian couldn't keep Mrs. McEwen. She couldn't keep up, and so she gave me The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then I sort of saw the same story, but in a way, Jesus as a lion. So I always talk about that. C.S. Lewis beautifully contextualized the gospel for children
Yeah.
and for everybody. I think I still read those books and once every couple of years try to read through them. And I did it last summer as well. The whole series, and I found a couple of places where they were talking about savages, and I was like, no, don't fall off my pedestal, don't get knocked off the pedestal. But I feel like that contextualization, and also Martin Luther, like the whole thing, like the whole Great Reformation, and there's other players, of course, but I always feel like we should rename the Great Reformation the Great Contextualization, because it was just wrestling the gospel back and putting it in the common vernacular of the people. And to me, that's one of the steps in the missionary thing to do with Indigenous people here in Canada.
Yes.
It's been missed, that step of contextualization, of placing the gospel in the soil, letting it grow indigenously, So, um, and I feel like for me, that's been, it wasn't until about 1996, 97, I started meeting leaders like the late Dr. Richard Twist, Lakota Sakanju, and others and Terry LeBlanc, Mi'kmaq Elder, and other ones who were talking about being Native and being Christian, being very strongly Native and strongly Christian. And nobody had ever talked that way before. It was always like, you know, if you want to be a good Christian, it was the residential school story. If you want to be a good Christian, you need to be less native, and you know, and Christian it was the equivalent to citizen.
Yeah.
So I had, and after the TRCs, so I sort of had like a good foundation of my faith before, you know, like going to Bible school and stuff. And wait, that was in '97. That's when I was in my undergrad degree. So it was kind of like a good foundation of having theology, but also these indigenous folks doing indigenous theology. And two of my really good friends are Ray Aldred, who's at BFP, Cree theologian, and Adrian Jacobs, Cayuga, who's at Sandy Soto Center. So just these great friends that I have. Wendy Peterson, our late friend, she's Métis. Sherry Russell, who's Soto. Just these strong indigenous people. And that sort of saved me, and that sort of helped me. And then my doctoral work, I started asking about elders about the names of God in our language. And these are old names. And I didn't know, I'd always been told that, you know, the Great Spirit or whatever, the native view of God was an evil spirit or a false God. And so I had to just sort of dive in, and that's I wrote Introduction to First Nations Ministry, a book that came out of my doctoral work based on that sort of journey. But after the TRCs, I had like a massive crisis of faith, because I was like, I remember walking down my little hallway here and then just remembering a story, one of the graphic stories that the residential school students told. And some people even don't want to believe that these bad things happened. They're like, it couldn't have been that bad, you know. And I'm like, if you had in your classroom, if your grandkids or your kids came home from school and they said, and there was 10 kids in the class and 9 of them said, this teacher did something bad to me, who would you believe? Would you believe that one kid, you know, and just go, oh, it's okay, it's not. But so this is our story, like so many of even the kids that or the residential school survivors that said that they had an okay time, or the residential school stories were, or experience was okay, usually on their deathbed that would change. And they would begin to be able to talk about that.
Open it up.
So my crisis of faith, I was like, God, where are you? How many times in my life do I have to say, where are you? But where were you also when these babies were being brutalized? And I was like, I was mad at God, and I was like, I don't want to believe in you anymore. I don't even want to have anything to do with this, because I had gone to probably about, I don't know, 8 or 10 or so of the TRCs, heard all of these stories, and was there as a support person, but ended up having my own crisis. And my mom went to residential school as well, so we're all living with the residential school syndrome. But the thing that saved my faith was those stories that the elders told me of the Creator. Those stories saved my life, and I didn't let go of God. And now my faith is different. I have I'm just sort of not interested. If people want to do evangelism, I'm like, just stop. Please just stop, especially for Native people. I'm like, we're over evangelized. We've all heard the gospel. Most of our people have faith anyway. You know, we need justice stuff done now. But if you're interested, or if you feel called to do, or to go into Native ministry, you need to do, like, do you need to take an Indigenous Studies course? You need to take a couple of years and just really learn. So listen to Native people, read Indigenous authors, listen to Indigenous music, you know, just really jump in and do some hard work. So I guess my faith has changed. I think it's strengthened, and I feel like I'm a bit more of I don't know, I'm a bit more of last, I guess, well, quite a few years, but I think especially in the last 10, 15 years, my phrase is now walk alongside. So I say, I want to walk alongside you in your faith journey, or if you want to walk alongside Indigenous people. And that's sort of more my way of being now. It's, certainly don't have all the answers. You know, thank God for that.
Well, it becomes relational then, doesn't it? You know, to walk alongside, we're not walking ahead of, we're not pushing behind, we're not dragging, we're walking along with. And the relationship becomes the place where we learn and we grow and we experience God's presence.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Cheryl, I'd love to. We're going to have to sit and have some more conversations. I'd love to have longer today, but let's tie it together. But I want to ask you one quick question. Are you still singing and writing songs?
Yeah, well, like I've written like half songs over the last, but since the TRCs again, that's one of the things that's kind of shut down. And I heard somebody say when like artists when there's trauma, the first thing that goes is the art or the that. So I haven't like finished a song in years. My last album came out in 2011.
Mm,
I haven't done, it's 10 years now. I haven't done
yeah.
any,
Mm,
yeah, and all that time. I still do sing. still sing my own songs or whatever. You know,
sure.
but yeah, I hope that comes back because that was nice. That was fun to do that.
Well, out of my experience, I was happy to receive your music. I was blessed listening to it. So I just I needed to ask if you is
Yeah,
there anything new. We'll
thank you.
look forward to see what unfolds for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheryl, thank you so much for your time today. I
Mhm.
really appreciate it, and we'll draw this to a close for now.
All right. Thank you for all the good
Okay,
questions. I appreciated that very much, Dan.
thank you. Just